We've been looking at Deuteronomy chapter 20, and in that discussion we extended things beyond that chapter, and we did a review of the history from the departure from Egypt to the death of all the people and then into the promised land. So we can extend this a little bit further. How far can we go? We had a few more verses when we first approached this subject. Some dates, some verses. Anyone? You're not sure the question? This morning we got to hear, spoke about what happened at Zerad, but we went a little bit further than Zerad. When we first discussed all of this, when we went to Deuteronomy, we went to Joshua. At Zerad, is Moses dead? Is Moses dead here? No, he's not dead yet. So the story goes a bit further. Can't remember? No? Remember? We did this the other day. We went through all the verses, then we developed a story, if you remember. We did that. Yeah, where will this story end? Where will it end? No. We went to Joshua 4:19, and it said, "And the people came up out of Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and encamped in Gilgal in the east border of Jericho." Remember that? So that's the 10th day of the first month. But there's some dates before that. 10th day of the first month, and this is Joshua 4:19. And where are they? People came up out of Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and encamped in Gilgal, in the east border of Jericho. So this is Gilgal. Where did you read Gilgal this morning? Where were we when we read Gilgal? Sorry? Did you get the book? Joshua chapter 5. Here? Verse 9. So Joshua chapter 5 verse 9, "And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you, wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day." So in 4:19, when they're encamped at Gilgal on the east side of Jericho, verse 20, they're going to set up the stones for a pillar. And then 5 verse 2, they're going to circumcise the people. So that's all happening here. We okay with that? And if we went a little bit further, we stopped in 5:9, If you go to 5:10, what's happening in 5:10? Joshua 5:10. Now we get to the Passover. So it's the 14th of the 1st. And it's Passover. And this is 5:10. Just let's feel what we had in here. What information did we have? Yep, we're in a new year. Did we read something from the first story of Joshua? We know Joshua 1:2, Moses is dead, we know that. Joshua commanded, verse 10, the officers of the people, saying, pass through the host, and command the people, saying, prepare ye victuals, for within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan, to go in to possess the land which the Lord God giveth you to possess it. So that we mark those 3 days there. Then they send the spies in chapter 2. Sorry?
Also mark 30 days.
Where do we find the 30 days? Deuteronomy 30. 34 verse 8. And the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid the hands upon him. The children of Israel hearkened unto him, and did as the Lord commanded Moses. So we've got 30 days. Anything else? Where are we? Deuteronomy 1 verse 3. And it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spake unto the children of Israel. So we're on the first day, on the 11th day of the first month, in the 40th year. And this is Deuteronomy 1 verse 3. And Moses, I'm going to say sings. So I'm just going to put the song there. First day of the 11th month. I did have it right the first time. First day of the 11th month. So from the first day of the 11th month to the 10th day of the first, which is the 41st year, 14:1:41. We have 3 days here. So you've got at least 33 days. So that would take us to the 12th month here. So we'll say it's the middle of the 12th month of the 40th year where Moses stops speaking. So he speaks for about a month. Everyone okay with that? That's what we did at the beginning of our class when we first looked at it. So we'll put 30 days. No, I won't put it down because we don't know that. So it's about 30 days for the book of Deuteronomy. And we saw, because it's so long, that this develops the argument he's repeating and enlarging upon what he says day by day as he goes through. That's as far as we got to, I think. 14th day of the first month. He's in Gilgal. What does Gilgal mean? Removal of the curse. When you remove the curse, what can you do? What can happen to you? Sorry? You're pardoned. So when you're pardoned, what can happen? You can be circumcised. So you can be circumcised because you're pardoned. It's the removal of the curse. God's going to roll away the curse. Everybody okay? So that's why they get baptized in Gilgal. That's what they're waiting for the curse to be removed. Any questions? What was the curse? Which verse are we in? Joshua 5, verse 9. And the Lord said unto Joshua, this day have I rolled away the reproach. He says reproach of Egypt from off you. Wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. So we just said curse, but the passage itself says the reproach of Egypt. Joshua 5 verse 9, the reproach of Egypt. What does the word reproach mean? I said curse, and I think everybody kind of followed along with that. It says reproach. Reproach means the disgrace. We'll go with disgrace. I don't know if most people probably know what the other words are. Contumely and pudenda. Does anybody know what pudenda means? Pudenda. Pudenda. I don't know how to even. So I'm just going to go with disgrace. Someone will find out what those words mean. That's straight from Strong's. Brown Driver Briggs says the reproach or the scorn or the taunt, the shame, the disgrace. We said curse, it's disgrace. It comes from another word, which is 2778. It means to pull off or to expose. So it comes from the word expose, which means in a negative sense, defame, to expose people for what they really are. So what does it mean when it says the reproach of Egypt? That's what the curse is. They had some curse that was associated with Egypt and it's going to be removed now. What was that curse? Sister Emma. Sorry? So the reproach or the curse is that they're all going to die. But it doesn't just say the curse, it says the reproach of Egypt. Reproach means the disgrace or the shame. The shame, the disgrace of Egypt now gets rolled away. Starts back in Egypt, Numbers chapter 14. Numbers 14:22, because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles which I did in Egypt, and in the wilderness have tempted me now these 10 times and have not hearkened to my voice. Therefore they shall not see the land, therefore they shall die. So what's the reproach of Egypt? My brother, with the reproach of Egypt. Numbers.
Because of the rebellion of the children of Israel, God wanted to destroy them.
Just want to stop you there. Just tell me what the reproach of Egypt is. Because what you told me is because they've got the reproach of Egypt, this is what God's going to do. But tell me what the reproach is. You don't know how to describe it?
Being like the heathens, not being circumcised.
To be like the heathen and not being circumcised. So the reproach of the Egyptians is, you look like us. You dress like an Egyptian. That's what the reproach of Egypt is. Yeah? And they're no longer going to dress like Egyptians. Yeah? My brother? I thought you had your hand up. Oh. My sister? The Egyptians had pride, and that's what he's talking about. Okay? The Egyptians were exposed that their gods were powerless, and that's the shame of Egypt, the reproach of Egypt. Sister?
I think it's the curse that is pronounced upon the men of war, that they must die.
What's that got to do with Egypt?
Because it's after they came out of Egypt that were not able to reach Canaan. I don't know why God is referring us to the reproach of Egypt. But I think
Okay, so they go to Kadesh Barnea and they don't do apostasy. So they enter into Canaan, and as they're entering into Canaan, if what we're saying is right, what would have had to have happened as they enter in? What does Moses have to do? Based upon the lines that we've been studying.
they have to make
Moses has to do something. Forget that question. I'll ask you another question. They leave Egypt and Moses has to do something. What does he have to do? He has to sing a song. Good. So they go to Kadesh Barnea. Everything's going right. What does Moses have to do? So he's going to have to sing a song. We're okay with that. So they don't do any apostasy when they go to Kadesh. Can we have Joshua 5:9 fulfilled? Can Moses go to the people and he's going to... We know it's Joshua now, but whoever's going to say that, in the stories, Joshua's going to be doing this. But Moses hasn't sinned, because he's only Kadesh. He's good. So who's going to be speaking? Him or Joshua? Moses, because everyone passed through. He's going to sing a song. He's going to sing a song. Can Moses say to them, this day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you? Could he say that to them at Kadesh Barnea? when they haven't sinned. He can't say that. So this verse is only applicable after the sin and after the wilderness wandering. That's the only time you can say this. Forget if it's Joshua or Moses. Moses doesn't go in because of his own problems. Do you agree with that, my brother? Do you actually understand that conversation? You understand? You agree with my sister's analysis? Her conclusion, her position. You agree with that position? Do you agree with that position? Yeah? Sister Elizabeth, you agree or disagree? Don't tell me why. You agree. Okay, so we've got about 4 people agreeing. Now, we're all brethren, and I don't know anything more than anyone else. So I'm going to say I disagree. Okay? So I disagree. My brother, what's your position? Your position. You agree with my sister, or you agree with me? Repeat the thing. Oh, okay. We've got to keep track. I know some of the conversations get long, but keep track because I forget what the question is. We're at Kadesh Barnea. Everyone has passed the test. Moses sang a song in Exodus 15. Now he's going to sing another song. All I can say is that it's Deuteronomy because he's going to repeat the law. Yeah? But it's only 11 days. Actually, it's not 11 days afterwards because they've, say a year afterwards when he got the law and everything. So they're at Kadesh, they're going to go into the land, he's going to sing a song, and then he's going to say to them, this day I've rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off your back. Doesn't say back. Can he say that then? My sister says he can't say that. He can only say that after 40 years. And I'm saying, I think he can say that in Kadesh Barnea. So what are you saying? He can? So you agree with me? Okay? It's a bad decision. So tell me why he can say that.
Because he has already accomplished his mission, and his mission was to take the children of Israel out of Egypt. So when he has done his mission, he has the right to say that simply he has done his mission.
Okay, if I can paraphrase what people have said, tell me if I'm misquoting you. They've said that the reproach of Egypt is the curse. And you're saying, is it the curse or not? Is it the punishment, all the people are going to die? Is that what the reproach of Egypt is? You're saying yes or no? You're saying it's no, because they haven't done any, they're not all going to die. So you're definitely saying the reproach of Egypt is something else. So it's all about what is the reproach of Egypt. So you tell me what the reproach of Egypt is.
The bondage of Egypt.
We'll stop there.
I think if we read what Joshua is doing, he's doing the circumcision. And the reproach of Egypt there could be uncircumcision because they've been wandering in the wilderness while they are uncircumcised. So it's good to circumcise them, that reproach of Egypt is going to be removed.
Why is that not the reproach of the wilderness? Because they were getting circumcised in Egypt.
They get out in Egypt while uncircumcised.
Sorry?
They get out of Egypt while uncircumcised.
Do they? They're not circumcised when they're in Egypt for 215 years.
Those who now circumcised,
So the day they left Egypt, everybody was circumcised according to the law.
yeah, those who were adults.
Yeah, according to the law, it's all been done.
Yeah.
When they leave it, for 40 years, no more circumcisions. So why is that not the reproach of the wilderness? Why is it the reproach of Egypt? That's his question. Or that's his position.
I don't know. But I think that could be a risk of that one. Usually men fall out.
Okay, you got to know When you say I don't know that, you've got to know, otherwise you're not sure that your position is correct. Yeah? So, did everybody hear what my brother said? Yeah? Brother Alex? You don't agree with him? You're not sure if you agree? Sister Schneider, do you agree? I can't hear you. You disagree? You don't know? Why don't you know? So, we'll go with Sister Schneider. So, they're going into Canaan, and Moses is going to give them lots of instructions. So, someone can find the verse for me, for us, for our class. He's going to say something like this. When you go into this land, don't behave like... Let her do it. Don't behave like whom? Don't behave like the inhabitants of this land, this one, Canaan. And also don't behave like the Egyptians. What are these people doing wrong? Idolatry. What did the Egyptians do wrong? Okay, so we haven't fully gone into what happens when you go into Canaan. That's still in Deuteronomy 20. But we've all read the verses, verse 5 to verse 8, and in fact to the end of the chapter. You've read that before, and I'm sure you've read it now. We haven't read it in class. So when they go into Canaan, the first place they go to, what's the first thing that happens when they go to Canaan? Engagement. Who do they meet first? Which people, which city, which story? Sorry? Ai. Ai is not the first one. Don't help her. Remember, there's these 3 days. We're in Joshua chapter. Someone shout out the chapter we're in. Not 5. Chapter 1. Joshua chapter 1 verse 11. Is my mic okay? Is it when I... 1:11. You okay? 3 days. 1:11. You good there? Chapter 2. What's going to happen? Verse 1. 2:1. Where to? Jericho. So Jericho's number 1. Are you okay with that? What's number 2? Someone shout out the chapter. Number 2. My sister, do you know what chapter it is? Jericho is the first place. The second one is where? Just tell us the chapter number. Which number? 8. She said number 8. Yep, it begins in chapter 7. When they begin to capture Ai. It goes wrong at first. So chapter 7 it goes wrong, and that's the story of Achan. Then in chapter 8 is where they destroy it. Good? We agree with that? This is Snyder. Then what happens? Next engagement. Which chapter are you in? Okay, the story of chapter 9 is what? verse 3, 9:3. Gibeon. We're going to go back to Deuteronomy 20, and it's going to tell you how to behave with the different nations or countries. Okay? We're going to go back to there. So we're sort of jumping forward. So we've got Jericho, Ai, and the Gibeonites. So the Gibeonites tricked them. And what did they end up doing with the Gibeonites? Mr. Snyder, what did they do with the Gibeonites? They spared them. What did they do with them? Okay, so we'll step back to my original question. It says, don't be like two groups of people. Group 1, Canaanites, their issue. Don't be like the Egyptians, their problem. Slave masters. We're going to see that when we go to our study. So now they're going into Canaan. It was only supposed to be 11 days. We'll forget all of this, because all of this is just the setting up of the system. Once the system's set up, it's 11 days and you go into Canaan. And what's going to change when you go into Canaan compared to Egypt? Okay, so the issue is slavery. What was the problem in Egypt? They were slaves to the Egyptians. Now they're going to enter into Canaan. As they enter in, what are they going to be? They're going to be the slave masters. We'll take the word slave out of it. So now they are the masters. Okay? So, my brother, we're in Joshua 5:9. Tell us what the reproach of Egypt is that's going to be taken off them now. Slavery. So the slavery of Egypt is now going to be taken off them. Now they're free, properly free in their own country. The bit in the middle, where are we? Here, all this up to here, all of this has got nothing to do with Egypt. All of that was their own sins. This is the sins of the wilderness. All of this is preparation, and it takes you all the way back to Egypt. The problem in Egypt was they were slaves. Was that a reproach to be a slave? Was it a shameful thing? Yes. Why are they slaves? Why are they slaves? How did that happen? In their minds? How did they become slaves? Slaves are right at the bottom. How do you ever get right to the very bottom? Where do they begin their story? Sorry? I'm going to say they begin their story in Goshen. Because it's about Egypt, the reproach of Egypt. Goshen is where? No, not in Egypt. Where is Goshen? Why were they given Goshen? On the scale of 1 to 10, where is Goshen? Someone said? No, not the place. The concept. Goshen is number 10. It's the best place to be. So they went to the very best place, given everything, and they loved it so much they decided to stay. So they end up becoming slaves. So the shame of Egypt, the reproach of Egypt, is that they needlessly became slaves. It was a foolish thing to do. They were supposed to sojourn in Egypt, weren't they? And they end up liking it so much, they remain. Who else does that sin? Which person does that sin? Or people? It's more than one. Name them. Mordecai, Esther, and all the nameless people around them. They love Babylon so much, they decide to stay. Because they don't want to let go of their goods. We call that what condition? Laodicean. You had the same problem in the Second World War. There are many people who see what's going on, what's happening, but they want to turn a blind eye. They want to pretend that it's all going to be okay, but they see it. Hitler didn't pop out from nowhere. Everyone can see what's going on. It's reported in the newspapers what's happening. It wasn't that people were blind, it's that they refused to see. So we would call that what? The reproach of Germany. It'd be the reproach of Germany, wouldn't it? Many of those people don't come out. So the reproach of Egypt, my brother's saying, is the bondage in Egypt, the unnecessary bondage, the shame. You should be ashamed that you were slaves. But now God's going to take that shame away, because now you're going to be free men. You okay with that? You okay with that, my sister?
Yes.
My brother? Are we all okay? We're on the same page now, Sister Elizabeth? Yeah? The reproach of Egypt is the bondage of Egypt, not the wilderness wandering. So, I don't like to do this, what I'm going to do now. Because I don't have good direction, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway. If we don't have an answer quickly, I'm just going to point out, so people who are watching, maybe we could study this later and maybe we come to a solution. This is a discussion that my brother and I had during the break. So it's about this here. Remember we had a discussion at the end of class that he said he didn't quite agree with this curse or the numbering compared to this one. Are we okay? Numbers 1, 1, this one here, we said it really should go here because it's connected to this one. So let me tell you what his problem is, or what the problem is. Everyone is 20 years old. We okay with that? So that's our target audience. Everyone's 20. There are men and there are women who are 20. Which Bible verse? Brother William? Numbers chapter 1, 45 and 46. It tells you that there are 600,000 men plus a few extra. Yeah, plus a few extra. So it's 600,000 men. Doesn't tell you how many women it is. So we're hearing this story here, and the question is, or the statement is, there's two types of men. And there's also two types of women. We've got good men and bad men. Good women and bad women. Are we okay with that? The definition of good and bad is you rebel or you be good. So God sends you on a mission. He says, go into Canaan, and they say no, and they say yes. So these people say no and yes. Yes and no. The question is, will you go into Canaan now? The good people say yes, the bad people say no. We okay with that? So in the story, we know for sure that there are 2 and 10. 12 spies. The women are not sent out to be the spies, so we only have these 2 and 10. Then the story says, only these 2 people will go into Canaan, and it says everyone else will die. Every single person. But when it says every single person, the every single person was, whether you go to Deuteronomy, men of war, Joshua, men of war, Numbers, men of war. It's always the men of war. So it's on this group here. So the question is, how many people how many people are bad that said, no, we're not going? If we take Joshua and Moses out of that story, we'll leave them on their own. How many people would this be? Is that right? So, did 599,998, did that many people all say, no, we're not going to listen? Or were there some men of war there who said, I think we should go? My brother says, every single person said no, except for 2 people. The 10 are going to be destroyed. We know that. So if we take the 10 out, this is 88. Yes? The 10 already said no to begin with. They're what caused the problem. And did every single man of war who's over 20, did they all say, yep, we're going to go on your side? So either everyone was no, or some people said, yeah, we agree with Joshua and Caleb, but they're still going to die anyway. I don't know which position that we hold. We know that everyone dies. The question is, did everyone say no, or just because you're part of the church, you end up suffering? That's the question that kind of asking, I'm posing. Does that make sense? So, unless someone's got a good answer, we're going to move on. Because I think it has some significance one way or the other. I think it's a significant question, but I didn't want to discuss it in class.
Not all say no.
Some are good men here, based upon what?
If you go and read Deuteronomy 14, you can see that
Deuteronomy 14 or Numbers 14?
Numbers 14. I can see those of Moses and Aaron, they are on this side, but they do not agree with
Moses and Aaron are where?
Moses are on the right side, but they do not agree with
They're on this side, right side.
no left side. But they did not agree with 10. They agree with 2, yet they were among the people.
So they're going to die now.
But still they're gonna die later. But at the time when these people murmured, they did not murmur to them. They are out of murmuring.
Why is Moses going to die? Is Moses going to die because of this problem, or is Moses going to die because he strikes the rock?
Not because of that problem. Different problem.
So why are you conflating the two?
The reason why I bring them together is that you have categorized children of Israel into 2. We have the 10 spies. These 10 are categorized into those who were courageous to go and fight, and those who were fearing. You see me? Then now those who were fearing, you have placed the congregation under those who were fearing, and the 2 people who is Caleb and Joshua on this side. But I'm also saying that Moses, in that particular event, they were together with those of Joshua, but you have included him in the side of.
No, I understand your logic. You're just repeating yourself. I get that. But you're saying Moses, he could never enter Canaan because of this curse. That's what you're saying. You can't make him die through circumstantial evidence, through some other means. You're saying he died because of this.
I don't say that.
I'm saying you do say that. Your words might not say, but you're saying that.
I don't know how I say that. Please explain, how do I say that? For me,
The Bible says he died because he strikes the rock. If he didn't strike the rock, would he go into the promised land?
yeah.
So it would have been 3 people. So does he have to strike the rock in order to fulfill this prophecy? You're not going to predestinate him, are you?
Yeah.
Okay, predestination becomes dangerous. I really want to urge that we don't do that. That we don't predestinate if we get into problems.
So, this number that you have,
Bit louder, please.
the number that you have, 599.
Yes, this number here.
So my brother is suggesting that Aaron is included in that number. I don't think the Levites were numbered. Aaron is a Levite.
Okay, so that's a separate argument. If you're going to have the Levites or not in that. So that wasn't his argument. I think his argument is they're all there because they die. Moses is not a Levite, nor a priest, is he? So he was just using Moses and Aaron, I think, in a different way. So you're correct. We haven't even done that. We haven't asked, could there be a 22-year-old Levite who makes it all the way through? We haven't discussed that. Because is a Levite a man of war? Not a man of war, I don't think. They're not part of the numbered people who go to make battle. So we haven't even delved into that issue. What we certainly have tackled. Before we move on, I don't know if we're going to get anywhere, do we all agree that the women are not being counted? So, even though we don't have any evidence one way or the other, if we just said, could a 60-year-old woman go into Canaan when she's 60 here? Could she go into Canaan if she's 60 years old? She's 60 here. They did the sin, and how old was she? How old was she here when they did the sin? Depending if you're going to count 38 or 39. She was over 20. So she's over 20 here. Can she go into Canaan? Yeah? So we can have all these women who are elderly and they've got no husbands. Because all the husbands have died, but all the wives are there. I don't know if we conceptualize that, or if we say that all the women died as well, because the story seems to indicate that the women didn't die, or they weren't part of the problem. Some may have died of natural age. So there's that thing to factor in. And I would suggest it changes the way you view what it looks like when you go into Canaan. How family structures set up, how society works. Because you've got all these elderly people, all women, all widows, that need it taken care of. Then, what about all those priests and Levites? Can they all go in? Or did they all get cut down as well because they were over 20? 25-year-old priest or Levite here, can he go in? Brother Roger's saying yes and you're saying no. Oh.
My point was that priests and Levites were not counted, but those who were wasted on the way they were people who are counted.
So you can have old priests here? Everybody agree with that? So there's evidence they're not part of the rebellion. We're here, where the rebellion is. Where would we go to the first rebellion? They leave, they set up. It's here, isn't it? Somewhere in here. If we put 40 days here, this is around maybe the 4th or 5th month of the first year, and they have the golden calf. And they're faithful here. And so we're saying that it looks like they're faithful here because they're not considered men of war. So it changes a lot of how we perceive things. I think it does.
Yeah, Numbers 140, 49 is saying, only thou shalt not number the tribe of Levi, neither take a sum of them among the children of Israel. So,
Verse what?
149.
149. Do we have 149 here? Is this one here? Men of war. And we have 149, no Levite. So we can proof text it. They're not counted.
In fact, you can start from Numbers 147, 147, 48, 49, 6 believers.
47 to 49. So I'm not going to turn there, but what happens 2 chapters later? Now they're numbered. And this is the story of Acts 27. Yeah? So there's 2 separate numberings. So we know that this has prophetic significance because we're tying it now back to Numbers chapter 3. 2 types of numbering, 2 separate numberings. They're not men of war. So all this has to have some kind of prophetic significance. Hopefully we can see that. Anybody have any answers here? Are all these sinners, or you just caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time and you're going to die just because you were there? Time and chance. You're faithful to God, but you were not chosen to be part of the 12, and therefore you will just die because everyone else is going to die. Or every man was horrible.
So, Ellen White comments about that one.
She comments on this question.
Yes.
Tell us to where she does that.
Signs of the times.
We'll catch your question in a minute, brother. Okay, before you read it to us, first give us the reference.
The signs of the time. September 2.
Yeah?
1880.
1880.
Yes.
1880.
Paragraph 3.
Okay. Let me do that again. I can't get it. I can't find it. I'll repeat it in a second. Let me find it myself. Signs of the times.
Second.
September the 2nd, 1880. Paragraph 3. So this series, the Signs of the Time series, was the prelude for which book? Patriarchs and Prophets. This is the prelude for that. So, paragraph 3. When Moses, yeah? Are we there? I'll give people a chance to find it. Okay, let's read. When Moses made known to the people the divine decision, their recent madness and insane rage turned to the most bitter regrets and lamentations. They knew that this punishment was merited. The 10 unfaithful spies had perished before their eyes, their doom signifying the destruction of all in their ranks. Above 20, signifying the destruction of all in their ranks above 20 years of age. Their unbelief and rebellion had cost them all. Okay. At this time, even had they shown true and sincere repentance, God might have given them another trial, as he did the ancient Ninevites. But instead of this, they sank down into utter despondency. They knew that God was in earnest with them. They passed a sleepless night, but with the morning came a hope. They determined to redeem their cowardice. They would not look toward the wilderness or the Red Sea, but they would equip themselves for war and would seize the land and possess it by their might. Peradventure, their works might be accepted of God. They confessed, saying, "We have sinned against the Lord. We will go up and fight according to all that the Lord our God commanded us." Here again, their transgressions had turned their light into darkness. The Lord never told them to go up and fight. He did not design that they should gain the land of promise by warfare, but through submission and unqualified obedience to his commands. So what's all of that saying?
So it says that those who are under the ranks of the tent, because they saw them, the tent dying. But now they regretted for the disobedience or what their reaction to what happened, and then they determined they will go and take the land by their power. They will go and walk.
Got all of that. Is this a proof text to say that it's 100% or 90%?
So what I can say about why it is 100% is that Ellen White says that God could have pardoned them, but they, like Ninevites.
Sure, he could have pardoned them 90%. Or you're saying the Ninevites is 100%?
Maybe I've not understood your question.
My question is, how do you know it's 100% bad people, not 90% bad people?
Because they were under the rank of the 10. Because Ellen White says those who are under the rank of 10, all of them, the 20 years and above.
Okay?
When I go back to where the burying took place, in Numbers 14, beginning from verse 1, I see all political witnesses, except 4 people. When I look at verse 5 through 6, I see only 4 people who did not actually voice against God. Now only 4 people who did not rebel against God. So I see only 4 out of those people are the only ones who did not rebel. And immediately after during the rebellion, I see God coming and pronouncing the curse. So may I only take only 4 people: Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb. And I take them from verses 5 to 6, Numbers 14.
So summarize what you're saying. Everybody's bad or only some people are bad?
Everybody was bad who was numbered except the 4.
Okay, so everyone's bad. So you agree with my brother. Anyone else before we finish? So let's go to a Bible story. Book of Genesis. We'll go to chapter 18. Genesis chapter 18. Are you there, Brother Kuto? Genesis chapter 18. Why are we in Genesis chapter 18? Sorry? Okay, that's the story. I don't want the story. I want to know why we're there.
The mission was to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay? That's their mission. So why are we studying this now?
There is a conversation that takes between Abraham and the Lord, and then he asks about those people about if they are the people with God destroy everyone else in Sodom. And then he starts with the number and goes down, and then the angel leaves Abraham.
So we get to verse 32. And he said, "Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this once. Peradventure, 10 shall be found there." And he said, "I will not destroy it for the 10's sake." So how does that work?
It says that if there were 10 who are faithful, God could have mercy of the entire people.
Why does he not want 100% compliance? Why can he move forward with the project just based upon 1% of the people? If 1% are okay, everything will go forward with Abraham's project. Why did God not say it doesn't work that way? If they're all bad, they all die. Let me rephrase that. Why do we not have, why is God willing to say, we'll carry on allowing things to happen if there are 10 people? Why does he not want 100% when we're saying we want 100% here? Does everybody understand the question? Let's go to 2 Samuel. So in the book of 2 Samuel, has anybody studied 2 Samuel, chapter 23 to the end of the book? Anybody looked at that in the past, ever? Put your hands up if you looked at that. Second Samuel, chapter 23 and 24. My question is, who's looked at this before? Brother Benjamin, you looked at this before. Chapter 23 and chapter 24. Does 23 go before 24? Is that the correct order? Which one's first? Chapter 23 or chapter 24? Chapter 24 is before chapter 23. Brother Dennis? Which one comes first, 23 or 24? 24 comes before 23, so the chapters are out of sequence. How do you know that? So you've looked before and you have pre-existing knowledge. Okay? So that wasn't why we came here, just a question. So, 24, what's David going to do? My brother? What's David going to do in chapter 24? Okay? And Job's going to say, Joab, his general. Verse 2, for the king said to Joab, the captain, do this work. And what does Joab say? Verse 3, what does Joab say? 24:3. Someone said something? Who spoke? Oh. Are you there, my brother? What does Joab say? You're not sure? Okay, so as teachers, we need to develop a skill. It's not easy to develop. It's to be able to read a story, if it's one verse, a whole chapter, a whole book, and try to understand the point or the direction. So David, in verse 2, tells Joab to number the people. And in verse 3, Joab says just one word. What did he say? Shout out. One word only. It only takes a one-word answer. No. No. If it was why, David would have answered him. But what does verse 4 say? For the people who said why, what does verse 4 begin by saying? Sorry? One person. No, not that. No, not the first word. What did David say? What does it say in the verse? David prevailed means won. He won the argument. If you say why, there's no argument. Joab said no. David says you will. We okay with that? Are you okay with my brother? Yep. So Joab says no. David says yes. We're going to try and simplify the story. When you get a simplified version of it, then go back in and check if the simplified version works. If it works, you know you're correct. Always try to go for a simple thing. So anyway, David's going to win the argument, and then what's he going to do? They're going to start counting. We okay with that? So it goes to all the place where he counts, and verse 9, verse 8. So when he had gone through all the land, they came to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. 9 months and 20 days later, they come back. Verse 9. Joab actually gave up the sum of the number of the people unto the king, and there were in Israel lots of people. But it tells once again it's the valiant men that drew the sword. We're okay with that? And then verse 10, and David's heart smote him after he had numbered the people. And David said unto the Lord, I have sinned greatly in that I have done. And now I beseech thee, O Lord, take away the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. So he realizes his sins. What's he trying to do? What's the point of this numbering? What's the point of numbering? My sister? Why is he numbering the people? You know, you can speak louder. How much strength he has got. So he wants to know how much strength he has got. What kind of strength? Human or divine? Human. So he's becoming more and more like the kings of the countries that surround him. More same kind of thinking. I wonder how strong I am. So now he realizes he's done wrong, so now he's going to be punished. Verse 11, God comes to him and says, you've got a choice. And then verse 14, David said unto God, I am in a great strait. Let us now fall into the hand of the Lord, not in the hand of his enemies, because that's one of the choices. For his mercies are great, and let me not fall into the hand of man. So the Lord set a pestilence upon Israel from the morning even unto the time appointed, and they died of the people from Dan to Beersheba. Dan to Beersheba is code word for what? Sorry? South and north? Everything. Yep, the whole country. It's code word for everything. 70,000 men. My brother. Why did 70,000 men die? Because just David said, count them. Joab comes knocking on your door. No, he doesn't. He comes knocking on your next door neighbour's door. The children or the wife open the door and he says, how many men have you got here? And the husband comes up and he says, there's me and my son. And Joab writes what? My older son. What does Joab write in his record book? 2. So that now he's got to come knocking on your door. What are you going to do when he knock on your door? What will you do? You're going to open. So you're going to open the door and Joab's going to say, oh, you look of age. How old are you? What are you going to say to him? Will you lie or tell the truth? You're telling the truth. So you're going to allow yourself to be numbered. Do you know it's sin to be numbered? Do you know it's sin to be numbered?
Are you asking me depending on that time or I'm not getting it? Like if I was,
He went to your next door neighbour. Now he's come to your house. You know why he's here. You had time to think about it. You had a minute from that conversation you could hear. Comes to your house, and what are you going to do when he knocks on your door? You said, I'm going to open the door, and he's going to say, how old are you? Because he's about to write, and you're going to say, I'm over 20. You said, that's what I'm going to say. And my question to you is, do you know it's sin to be numbered?
if I know already that it's sin to be numbered, I will not tell my, I will not tell him.
I'm asking you, do you know it's sin to be numbered?
When he's asking me,
Last week, 10 years ago, 5 minutes ago, before you opened your mouth, before you went to the door, do you know it's sin to be numbered?
if I knew it, then I will not tell you the truth. If
So let me ask you this question. Does Joab know it's sin?
I know.
And what's he doing? What's he doing?
He chooses to do it.
Okay, so I'm asking you, do you know it's sin?
Now if I know
No, not if. I'm asking, do you know it's sin or you don't know it's sin? You're an Israelite and you're over 20. Do you know it's sin or you don't know?
I know.
You know. We all agree with that. Everyone knows it's sin. And you said, I'm going to knock, I'm going to open the door.
No, I will not open.
Okay, so we'll go through the story again. You heard him speaking. He's going to come to your door. What are you going to do?
I will not open.
He's going to keep on knocking. And he says, break the door down because they're not answering. What will you do?
Try to put
Okay? I'll give you an alternative. Get your wife to answer the door for you. Get your wife to answer. Or your sister. And say, no, we've got no young men here. Next door, that's where you want to go. Skip our house. Our father died and we've got no older brothers. Isn't that what you want to tell her? You lie? Yeah? Everyone knows it's sin. So these 70,000 men, why did they die?
they accept to be numbered.
They accept to be numbered. So do you think everyone knows that it's okay or wrong to be numbered? Does everybody even know why Job is even doing the numbering? Maybe they're doing a taxation. So I'll give a different story now. Now you don't even know why he's numbering. Maybe they're going to do a lottery. Maybe there's going to be a king's party and they're going to do a selection of all the valiant men. Maybe he's looking for a special bodyguard group of people, elite soldiers. You'd want to join that. Every man would. So you don't even know why he's there. So now you're going to open the door. Maybe they're recruiting for a top job. You've been waiting for that all your life. Would you open the door now and say, sign me up? You would, wouldn't you? Yeah? Of course you would. So these 70,000, did they die innocently or guilty? Because Joab doesn't tell them why he's numbering. So how can innocent people die for the sins of one man? Let me rephrase the question. I know what Ellen White says on this subject, but the story is that these men die because of David's sin. Do you agree with that? So, are we so sure that every single man here is bad? Are you still certain? I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying you're still certain that it has to be that way. I gave the story of David. I gave the story of Sodom. So not everybody has to be guilty. And then in our conversation, in the break, we had another story that if you go back to Millerite history, is all the world going to be converted? Every single person. I don't know how many, 10 million people they had then. I don't know how many people they had in the world. Are they going to be able to reach 10 million people? No chance. They can't do that. In fact, the Millerites, Adventists now, they recognize this fact. So after 63, when they become a formalized church and they're going to start really thinking about public evangelism, they get into a fight in the church. Do we know what the fight is that they have? They say we have to do public evangelism. And the church says, the world is this big, and how big are we? We're like that. And it's not going to work. So instead of wasting our money going to all these faraway countries, we should focus our attention properly. And what they do is they develop a theological argument. Does everybody know what a melting pot is? It's a pot where you melt things. Yes? So what's the melting pot in that history? The United States is the melting pot. So here's the United States, and they say everyone comes here, don't they? It's the land of opportunity. So the United States here, what's its relationship to the world? If everybody comes to the United States, what's its relationship? What do I put here? USA, world, equals. You okay with that? The USA equals the world. Everyone understand the logic? The Adventist logic. So now, can we manage the USA? For sure we can, because the USA is a small country in that history. You've basically got everything on the eastern board, the colonies as we would call them, and then you've got everything on the west. And in the middle, what is there? Nothing. It's like the Badlands, it's dead. In fact, I think they're only beginning to do probably the Oregon Trail is maybe not in full force, but it's there. And I don't know if they've extended the trains at the 1870s. I think they have. But you've only got the two coasts. Everything in the middle is just wasted space, basically. So it's pretty easy to manage. They said we can handle that. And if we do the United States, it's the same as doing the world. So what happens to all these people in the world who never heard the gospel? Nothing. They just get taken along for the ride. Perhaps there's 50 men, 500 men, 5,000 men who were all good men, and they just get taken along for the ride. This story, it's a good one, it's the second advent. This one, it's death. It's a death sentence because you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. So it's not a definitive answer. Maybe people disagree. Maybe people will respond back. If they do it quick enough, we can do it in class if people respond. But I want to suggest, based upon just the few stories that we've looked at, that perhaps there were faithful people here and they're just going to die needlessly. Remember, that morning, it was someone's birthday. Some poor innocent boy's birthday, and he's just turned 20. And his 19-year-old cousin said, "This is crazy. This Moses is a madman." And he comes to him and he says, "Isn't he mad?" And he say, "Yeah, I guess." Dead. Just because it was his birthday. Or his mother was quite old and she's going to get ill and not make it, and she could have entered into the promised land. So people die, innocent people die, because of the sins of these people. Let's summarize. We're in Exodus 22 verse 5. We want to understand why men and women can't wear the same clothes. What's this issue all about? We've already identified, Deuteronomy 22 verse 5. We've already identified that, how do we say it? Not primary principle. The most correct, I keep forgetting that. The most correct way to understand the verse is this understanding. A brave fighting man who is 20 years old or older, who's 20 or older. That's what that word seems to mean in its most proper context. 22 is part of a section in Deuteronomy that begins in chapter 20 and ends in 26. And it begins with warfare. In fact, all of this story is all about men of war. Is it coincidence that 22 verse 5 talks about this word? It could have chosen other words, could have chosen a different type of man, but it seems to include that there. And so now when we start talking about chapter 20, we've discussed that. We need to go back there to understand the work of the officers. We've got church and state. We've got how to interact. And it says, you're all scared. You're scared because you're going to have to do the work now, not like it was in Egypt. So we've used that idea and we went back to Egypt and brought us all the way back here. So we developed this story, and lo and behold, the whole story is about these valiant warriors, these soldiers, if we could say that. The story picks up the additional information. You have to be 20 and over. Then we saw there's lots of people who are 20 and over, 4 groups, men and women, good men, bad men. How is God going to operate? How does he deal with people? Is everything all about the individual, or are there corporate issues to decide? Are there corporate things that move us along? Okay, 3 stories. One story of the Millerites, one story of Abraham, and one story of David. Give one more. I forgot to check out the reference on this one. It's the story of Elijah. Elijah's in Revelation chapter 11. What does Elijah have the ability to do? 2 abilities. The first one, fire down from heaven, and the second one, stop rain. So he's got 2 abilities, fire and rain. Compare and contrast. Yeah, there's so much just in that story we can do. Rain and fire. So this idea that he can bring fire down from heaven, what story is that? Now it's easy to think that that's Carmel. It's not Carmel. The fight in Carmel is what? Who can bring fire down from heaven for sure. But that's not what's being brought to view in Revelation 11. Do you know the chapter? 1 Kings, we'll go there. So as we're turning to 1 Kings, he'll find that he'll give us the chapter in a moment. 1 King, Elijah is sitting on a hill and he's having a fight with the king. He's having a fight with the king. We're in 2 Kings. We'll do the chapter and the verse in a minute. Tell us the chapter, so we'll go to the chapter. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 1. He's having a fight with the king. So the king says, I've had enough of this, Elijah. I want him here to sort him out. So he sends a captain with his 50 men and says, Elijah, go and see the king. And what does he do? Does he kill the disrespectful captain? Who else does he kill? The 50 men. Are the 50 men guilty or innocent? We don't know. We don't know what they're thinking, but they didn't speak. So the fact they didn't speak makes them innocent, I would argue. It happens again. And then it happens again. And then eventually what happens? The new captain says, spare our lives, O Holy One. Treat him with reverence. And then he says, okay, I'll come with you now. So the men that died, those 50 men, why did they die? Because you have an arrogant captain, isn't it? Are those 50 men of the last group any more holy than the first ones? They might be scared because they know what's going to happen. So they might be fearful, but it doesn't mean they're holy. They may have even prayed to God to protect us or whatever, but they're not holy men. The only thing that saves them is their captain. What about if they had all repented? They said, oh, we're sorry, God, everything's good. And they say, Lord, why did you give us this wicked captain? We know what he's going to do. Luckily, they got a meek and mild captain, a mild one, reasonable. They could have had a horrible one who says, I don't believe in that, it's all superstition. We're going to see. And they would have pleaded with him, and what would he have said? Be quiet. I'm the captain, you're not. And would he have killed all of his soldiers? Would he have killed all of his soldiers? Of course he would have. Elijah was only speaking to the captain, he would have killed them all. So you've got fourth story, innocent people die. If you hang around with the wrong people. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, as we read these stories about people who die because of no fault of their own, it reminds us of the story of Moses in Numbers chapter 14, where he was prepared to die not with his people, but for his people. This is the mindset that we must have. Help us, Father, to have this mindset. Help us not to think that it's unfair that innocent people must die because of the sins of the guilty. Rather, may we be like Moses, who was not only willing to die with those who deserved death, the guilty, but he was willing to take their place and allow them to live and for him to die. Lord, it's a high calling to be a priest. We know that there are people bowing before you now who are ready to move on, ready to do a work for you. But because too many of us in this movement are not ready, all of us have to suffer. It's easy to become resentful, Father. May this not happen to us. May we understand. And more than understand, Father, may we be willing to be put into the place of those who are guilty, to take their punishment and allow them to have our position of freedom from persecution and judgment. Help us, Lord, to understand what these stories are designed to teach us. We pray in Jesus' name.